You are listening to the Pro-Black Perspective on KWAZ Radio. Welcome to the Pro-Black Perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions. Your host tonight is the author of the Pro-Black Compendium and Zuberi and the Maroons of Maa, the Pan-African Nationalist, Oni. Oni, what are we discussing tonight?
Peace Seeker, let me be the first to introduce you to a new page in history. The missing pages of our ideology of Pan-African nationalism has been recovered. Last week you heard a brother named Advertisement. What you don't know is that he has loaned me 2 rare out-of-print books and sent me digital copies of magazines focusing around Carlos Cooks, our missing intellectual. I digitized his rare books, and Advertisement said, sell that book. So now I offer you an ebook over 160 pages that can revolutionize our understanding and our thinking in terms of what really took place during the so-called American Civil Rights Movement. John Henry Clarke would say that Alton Maddox, who I've organized with or organized under, called the Civil Rights Consumer Rights Movement. Others would call it Silver Rights Movement. That's what I also heard Alton Maddox call it. But get this. John Henry Clarke took notes from Carlos A. Cooks. Malcolm X learns his black nationalism from Carlos A. Cooks. Dr. Ben Edward Porkchop Davis, these paragons took notes from Carlos A. Cooks. And now you get to take notes from Carlos A. Cooks. I don't have a set price right now. Some have opined that I should. But as it stands, you can send me what you could send me your appreciation, if you will. Appreciation for me digitizing and offering you your legacy. And remember, Amazon sells these books for $500 and $400. Now, I'm not saying you send no $500 and $400 unless that's what you got. But you send something and say, look, brother, you don't work for free. You understand? And I'll send you the book. If you send me, enough for a sandwich, I could just refund you and tell you go get yourself a sandwich. If that's what you value, go for it. Eat yourself a sandwich. But if you send more than that, you're good. You get a piece of black history. And you won't regret it. Today I'm going to read one of the speeches in Carlos Cook's and Black Nationalism, one of the books that were digitized in this Carlos A. Cook's reader. If you already have the Carlos A. Cook's reader, I want to say thank you, because you understand that we have to have a relationship of reciprocity. You understand that Oni is giving you something, and you should in turn give him something. You understand that. Many of our people do not. Many of our people are convinced that everything should be free. Like, why we don't have so many black schools, because public school is free. And black people are convinced, many of our people are convinced that, well, if school should be free, I shouldn't have to pay for my education. Of course, when university time comes, they pay. And of course, while their child is being miseducated, they pay with self-hatred and so on and so forth. But again, if you have the reader, turn to page 59 of 164. And I appreciate you, because you're not one of those who don't understand that you should give to get. That we are a reciprocal people. That we believe in reciprocity. That we show appreciation to those who are of integrity and who are doing for us. I wake up and do for you. I labored to digitize, to edit, to rotate, to merge. I labored for you. So I appreciate you for showing your support and your enthusiasm for your own story. And as always, I have a lot of appreciation for those of you who have purchased the Pro-Black Compendium and Zuberi and the Maroons of Maa. But without further ado, I will read this speech. And I'm going to try my best to orate this speech so that you can see, so that you can experience and feel this majesty. It's named Ras and the Caste, and it was done in January to December in 1956. One cause, one goal, one destiny. On January 1st, we held a Gala Freedom Day celebration, as we do every January 1st. The African Freedom Day celebration is a day we set aside to extol the feats and accomplishments of black people and nations whose efforts brought about independence to black people throughout the world. We are extremely elated over this January 1st because the Sudan became a sovereign state on that day. On January 1st, 1956, the Sudanese people assembled in Khartoum and proclaimed their independence. That proclamation made Sudan the youngest nation today, although Sudanese history shows that it is perhaps one of the oldest nations of recorded history. I have written an article, Freedom of the Sudan, for the next issue of the Street Speaker magazine. It provides a detailed background of the Sudan and also the aristocracy, contributions, and excellence of our African origin. The article is supplemented with a picture of Sayyid Ismail el-Azhari on the cover. Sayyid Ismail el-Azhari is the most dominant figure on the political stage in Sudan. He seems to be a man of great moral integrity and political acumen, and possessed of strength of character. He will be a great asset not only to the people of the Sudan, but could be the trumpeting voice clamoring for justice for all Africa in the halls of international assemblies. The world of black people is expecting to hear from Sayyid Ismail el-Azhari, and they hope he will take up the cudgel of Africa's freedom. We are passionately fascinated with the excellence of our African origin. We are living in a world today where all progressive and enlightened people are intrigued with their respective origins. This makes it impossible for anyone to inoculate you with doctrines and philosophies that suit their interests and make you an enemy to your own progress and advancement, as are the majority of black people today. If any racial or ethnic group is captivated by the excellence of its origin, it should be black people, because of our aristocracy among the races of the world. However, we realize what the last 400 years have done to our people. We have been mad to disown our heritage and true history throughout the most consistent and diabolical system of mental and physical torture the world has ever known. The Christian church was called upon to destroy the African mind in America. Prior to the advent of Marcus Garvey, the masses of black people were victimized into believing the lying white people's claim to supremacy. Whites asserted that since time immemorial, black people have never been anything but the drawers of water and hewers of wood for them. They insisted that black people in America were a lazy, good-for-nothing race suited only to be porters and scrub women. Africa is portrayed as a vast jungle, swampland, and desert where fierce savages live. As for the black race being lazy and good for nothing, Marcus Garvey proved beyond the shadow of reasonable doubt that black people did enjoy a highly cultured civilization in Carthage, Nubia, Egypt, Ethiopia, Dahomey, and Timbuktu before the white race came out of the caves in Europe. This was before they stopped eating the flesh of their dead relatives and using the skulls of their conquered dead for utensils. Black men and women were navigating the 7 seas, wearing cloth, practicing agriculture, writing calendars, smelting iron, building beautiful cities, embalming the dead, sculpting their image in stone, and building pyramids in Africa. It has been the devout and sacred duty of white people to wipe out the black race's knowledge of themselves and make them the subservient caste creature. By being passionately fascinated with the excellence of our African origin, the lying propaganda of the white people will only expose the whites for what they really are: a bunch of land-grabbing, people-enslaving, pathological liars, and homicidal maniacs who rule the world through lies, terror, murder, and exploitation. The best description of the white man that I heard was given by Ras the Murderer. Ras the Murderer was one of the many black men who had organizations supporting the Ethiopian cause during the Italian-Ethiopian War in the 1930s. All these men were named Ras, the Ethiopian word for prince. For example, Ras the Killer, Ras the Assassin, and Ras the Murderer. Ras the Murderer and his version of the beginning of the white man greatly disturbed the white authorities. They watched Ras the Murderer very closely. Ras the Murderer kept his act very clean, but one day he spat on the sidewalk and the authorities arrested him for committing this crime. When they brought Ras the Murderer before the white judge, the judge became very bellicose. He said, "So you are Ras the Murderer. Who did you murder?" Ras the Murderer answered, "Lying white propaganda about black people." The judge retorted, "I hear you give speeches in Harlem, mainly about the beginning of white people in a very vulgar way." Ras the Murderer replied, I will give you my personal version so that you can have the right account. It goes like this. A ball of pus wrapped in fur came rolling down the Caucasus Mountains and landed on the banks of the Caspian Sea. I looked in it, and lo and behold, it was the white man. The judge turned blood red in the face and hollered, 6 months. There is not a foul name that you can call a white man, or a heinous crime that you can accuse him of that adequately describes him and his guilt. If you call him a murderer, you only need to refer to the American Indian and the African Bushman. If you call him a kidnapper and enslaver, you only need to refer to yourself. If you call him a rapist, you only need to refer to Eurasia, the Middle East, and yourself. The cracker has bastardized 2/3 of the world. If you call him a land grabber, you only need to refer to America, Australia, New Zealand, the Middle East, and Africa. If you call him a liar, you only need to refer to his constitution, his treaties with non-white people, his holy books, his history books, his media, and his every form of expression. The white man is a very astute liar, murderer, and cheater. These are traits of his culture pattern. Marcus Garvey wrote his lengthiest poem describing the traits and behaviors of white people. The poem, The White Man, His Vanity Fair, starts, lying and cheating is the white man's game. Murdering, butchering, and killing brought him fame. The white man is a natural homicidal maniac and pathological liar. Those black people whose minds have been destroyed by a white people and have been inoculated with white psychology and white propaganda cannot be passionately fascinated with the excellence of their African origin. In fact, they have been made ashamed of their African ancestry and everything pertaining to it. The constant application of African nationalism upon the slave mentality of black people will ultimately bring a change. The present day black people are manufactured wrongos, and we will have to remanufacture them back to their normal state. We have to remove the minds of black people from white influence and control and make them aware of their true legacy and heritage before they can become passionately fascinated with the excellence of their African origin. The non-white people all over the world are becoming passionately fascinated with the excellence of their respective origins, and they are determined to remove alien influence and control from them. The exploitation and degradation practiced by white people over the black, brown, and yellow people over the last 300 years have caused the majority races to unite and rid themselves of white people. In the 1920s, Marcus Garvey asked the white race, "Are you crazy? Are you blind? Do you think that you can stop the forces of Africa and Asia combined?" And here we have in 1956, in the little Indonesian town of Bandung, 29 nations representing over 1,300,000,000 people of the colored races. They met to design the organic structure of a new world order. The delegates representing the oppressed of the current world order, as manifested by white colonialism and communist imperialism with their accompanying evils, poverty, war, turmoil, and ideological subversion, found common ground and achieved united action despite the differences of race, language, culture, and religion. I have written an article entitled Bandung and a New World Order, Colored Races Organized to Crush White Supremacy. This article will give you a more detailed breakdown on the Bandung Conference. At the Bandung Conference, every race was invited but the white race and the American-born black man. They are beginning to exclude you from the colored world and to lump you with the white man whom colored races are plotting to destroy. It started with the Chinaman in Korea. Heretofore, the colored races felt sorry for the Negro. although they sometimes found him fighting them for the whites. The Chinaman is reputed to say, "We don't have anything against you black people." But every time someone starts fighting the white man for his freedom, he looks up and sees you coming at him with a gun in your hand to kill him for the white man. I cannot feel sorry for you. I will have to wash you away. And that is what happened in Korea. The Negroes set all kinds of track records running over Pork Chop Hill and the 38th parallel, getting away from the advancing Chinaman. In that regard, you have a bad record of fighting the white man's battles. The War of Independence in 1776, the War of 1812, French and Indian Wars, the Civil War, Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, and now the Korean War. With all this dying and fighting for the white man, and with no record of fighting for black people, the colored races are beginning to lump you with the white man, their enemy. With religion waning in influence on the minds of the caste, Negro, the white man is pushing integration as the substitute, and the caste has swallowed the bait. The caste believes the white people are ready to share America with him on an equal basis. There has been no mention of integrating the caste into the economic hierarchy or sharing the economic pie with him. Yet the naive caste believes that the white man considers him as his equal and begins socializing with the caste on equal terms. Can you imagine this economic serf of a caste here in Harlem conducting an equal social relationship with Rockefeller in Scarsdale? Rockefeller invites the caste to dinner. He sends his chauffeur-driven limousine for the caste and drives him to Rockefeller's mansion upstate. The caste is led into a 21-room mansion with a living room and a dining room bigger than the caste's apartment. The caste sits down to a 21-course meal from soup to nuts. After the meal, the caste is led to the living room and is given a $2 cigar and some of the finest and most expensive liquor in the world to wash the meal down. The caste is put back into the limousine and driven back to his house in Harlem. By the laws of reciprocity, the caste must invite Rockefeller to dinner. Rockefeller has to take a train to New York and then a subway to Harlem, where he gets off at 135th Street and 8th Avenue. He then walks 2 blocks south and 3 blocks east, goes to the basement, and rings 2 1/2 bells. At this time, the caste invites Rockefeller into his one-room basement house, gives him a milk box to sit on, and offers Rockefeller a plate of pigtails and rice. The caste is a joke. He is the laughingstock of the entire world, and the willing, dedicated, fawning flunky of white people. That is why you were never invited to the Bandung Conference. Nobody takes you seriously. You are the circus clown of white society. The caste is always doing something foolish. Although he was not invited, Adam Clayton Powell Jr., the big-time caste politician and preacher, went anyway. Powell arrived at the airport in Bandung and nobody of importance met him. He tried to enter the foreign ministers' meeting at Bandung. They stopped him at the door and told him that this was a meeting for foreign ministers of nations, not for ministers of gospel or devilment. So they took Powell to a rural elementary school to address the 6th grade class, which was more fitting to his status. As Powell began concluding his speech to the class, a young Indonesian girl asked him what race did he belong to. Powell said, "The Negroes," and began his old grandfather tale. The children burst out in laughter and ran out of the class. The member nations of the Bandung Conference concluded they might as well invite the white man himself if they invited the caste Negro, because the caste would come back and tell the white man everything that happened. They were not wrong in that assessment, because as soon as Powell returned to the United States, he called a press conference. He said he wanted an immediate meeting with Eisenhower because he had some inside information on the Arab plan in Algeria and other plans of the Bandung Conference. A few weeks later, Powell was at a meeting in the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C., and he attempted to block a segregation bill and a disbursement of budgets to the public school system. An old decrepit cracker from West Virginia got up and knocked Powell down. Some say he shined his shoes in Powell's rear end. Powell got up without striking a blow and said, "He who throws the first punch admits defeat." Nobody takes the Caste seriously. That is why you were not invited to Bandung. One cause, one goal, one destiny. We'll be right back.
Greetings, everyone. This is Koku from the Bitter Medicine Podcast, inviting you to tune in to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Peace Seeker. Malcolm X, John Henry Clark, Joseph Ben Yakinen, Edward Porkchop Davis, and others took notes from Carlos A. Cooks and might not have obtained their nationalistic fervor nor worldview had they not heard Cooks. This is Oni from the Pro-Black Perspective, author of the Pro-Black Compendium and Zuberi and the Maroons of Maa. I scanned 2 out-of-print books valuing $800 new on Carlos A. Cooks, the foremost black nationalist after Garvey, and added Cooks magazines into one ebook that I can send you for your reciprocity. Send some love to cash.me/$ABSONI with the subject Carlos and your email address, and if your love is strong for your people, you'll get a book. If your love is too weak, you'll get a refund, and you should double your love next time. Carlos is the missing link, who was probably the greatest mind in the world from 1940 to 1966, standing over King and Malcolm like a giant over midgets. These are the missing pages of black history from the 1940s to the 1960s. I just need you to believe in your way of reciprocity, and as you give, you will receive. Cash.me/$ABSONI. Show me you value your story.
You are listening to the Pro-Black Perspective on KWAZ Radio.
So, thank you for listening. I know there was a lot there. There was a lot there. And this is why I really want you to have this book. There was Adam Clayton Powell Jr. I wasn't around in the 1950s. In the 2000s, all I've heard was praise for Adam Clayton Powell Jr. And I understand that there was historic praise for him, even by the likes of Malcolm X. But that right there is partly why you need a book from an authentic, clear-sighted African ideologue of the time. Because a lot of confusion comes from our past. You know, King, Malcolm X, a lot of what they said, did, a lot of it was confusing, or it bred confusion. There grows no wheat where there's no grain. You know, following, like Malcolm, like exalts this Nation of Islam, and eventually you have what you have today. You know, 5%, Farrakhan, Nation of Gods and Earth, Asar Society. You have a lot of confusion, a lot of cons, a lot of frauds, a lot of a lot of things without integrity, and it destroys what we have. You know, it destroys what we're supposed to be about. You know, literature like the Pro-Black Compendium, you know, that promotes a Pan-African nationalist state and you know, African security and African power. That's fundamental, but it's in a context where where a lot of other things are not as good, not as much quality, or even quality people still push wrong ideas because of the confusion that we have on our historical paragons. So you have legends like Khalid Muhammad and Sister Soldier, who are just amazingly articulate, amazingly informed, amazingly well-meaning, but also in some ways promoting an enslaver religion. You know, and this is mostly due to, you know, the historical fetishism of Malcolm, who said, hey, religion and politics, you know, they can't be the same. Whereas we understand from, say, Maroons of Maa, that these religious groups are political groups. That religion and politics are one and the same. You know, particularly when it comes to, well, really anybody, but let's say Eurasians. So you have this sort of confusion that comes through, you know, and it's that confusion that sets us back. So you might have, sure, you have your, you know, Armas and your Maroons of Maa, and of course, you know, your Onis and your Kambones and your Adar, you know, all sorts of stuff. Adar Rafal, Asar Matep. You know, you have great people today, you know, and the list could go on, Clyde Winter, so on and so forth, but they are not the majority, and they're not that far reaching, because we lost so many pages of our story that we're kind of catching up to where we should be. Essentially, a lot of our people set us back, oftentimes unwittingly, because on a path, you know, it's kind of like this. Let's say it this way: if Kemet wasn't destroyed, we would be much more technologically advanced, technologically forward than we are today. But Kemet was destroyed, or Kemet was lost. Its records were lost, and here we are. And it's the same with Carlos Cooks. This is Marcus Garvey's ideological son. When he's removed from the picture, you only have the students who might not have been as good as the master. You know, so you have your Dr. Clark, who influences Maroons of Maa, sure. You hear that? Or you have a lot of us who follow up behind, you know, Marimba or Clark or Ben or whomever. But the reality is that if we knew Cooks instead of Malcolm, or Cooks instead of Martin, or Cooks instead of the Black Panther Party, we would be further along. And so here today, you're listening to, you know, you're listening to an opportunity to get to know Cooks. You're listening to an opportunity to catch up with our story. When he mentioned the street speaker magazines, a few street speaker magazines are in this reader, as well as the Black Challenge. This is an opportunity that you shouldn't pass up. Because you see, for instance, how international Carlos Cooks is. Now, the Sudanese prime minister that he mentioned wasn't, might not have lived up to the expectation. Okay, but of course, you can't know that in 1956. Just like no one knows what's going to go on in Azania, but we expect great things from Malema. We expect great things from Malema, and we should outreach to Malema. And if you're listening to this on Saturday, understand that they have an election today in Azania. But we and of course, I recorded this before Saturday, so I can't tell you what's going to happen in that election. Again, like I said, you can only hope for the best at this point. But you see the internationalism that is sort of missed in the 60s or the civil rights movement. You see the extolling of our African past and the importance of our African past that is missed in the 60s and 70s. And you see the rejection of white ideas and communism. And to be fair, you hear this in Marcus Garvey, but again, you hear it in Carlos Cooks. And that in itself is of immeasurable value. And of course, Carlos Cooks, if you noticed, he changes Marcus Garvey's one aim, one God, one destiny, or one God, one aim, one destiny, into one goal, one cause, one destiny. And he does that understanding that, the phraseology that Marcus Garvey uses kind of embraces a white religion. And the reason being is the word God, capital letter G, is a name for the Europeans' version of supreme. And actually it is it's an oxymoron to say black God, or sometimes you hear today the black woman is God or the black man is God. Whatever you hear, it's an oxymoron because the word itself is more it is used as a name, if you will, for the white's supreme being, if you will, or the white version of a supreme being. And of course, this supreme being has a name separately, but the reality is that in the nomenclature, the word is pretty much the name for a mythical white man, and painting it doesn't change that it's still a mythical white man in a mythical white mythos. That's not compliant with an African mythos, if you will, or an African true reality. But what else can I say? Rockefeller, the story on Rockefeller, I don't know if I did it justice, but it's a funny read. And it's also insight into the anti-integration that we tend to elaborate on, but we don't elaborate well on, because the reality is that integration does not have in it an economic solution. Integration does not have in it economic parity for black people. You understand? What integration does is, so far, it has white people and black people pairing up, or white people and black people getting into awkward relationships. But it doesn't have, let's say, for lack of a better word, a black Rockefeller. You understand? It doesn't have black people and white people sharing economic control, and you can see more into the talk against integration in this book, and in that way it's very enlightening, because these are ideas that Malcolm admits he got. One thing you have to realize is that when Malcolm X leaves the Nation of Islam, he forms the Organization of Afro-American Unity. And again, look at the name, the nomenclature. You have Carlos Cooks calling us Africans, calling us blacks, and then Malcolm X brings it back to Afro-American. And of course, allegedly he's talking about all the diaspora, because at least all of the Western diaspora, because the whole Western, because the whole Western hemisphere is America. But again, it brings us backward, in a sense. But all the same, the literature that's passed out in the OAAU meetings are literature from the ANPM, the African Nationalist Pioneer Movement, of which Carlos A. Cooks was the head, right? And not only that, but John Henry Clark is counseling Malcolm X. And John Henry Clark was a student, or took notes from Carlos A. Cooks. They had an interesting relationship, but again, they had an interesting relationship where, at least in the early days, John Henry Clark called Carlos Cooks a crook, and Carlos Cooks called John Henry Clark a traitor. But that is regular Harlem at the time. Apparently Carlos Cooks' family was well to do, and it might be, if I didn't look into it, but there are a lot of black people who would not like you for being well to do, particularly if they have leftist leanings, of which it seems like, of which Dr. Clark, admits he had in certain parts of his life, So, calling Carlos Cooks a crook, because his family was well to do, isn't, it's just typical of particularly leftist, thinking amongst black people, because even I'm not going to say that I'm well to do, obviously. Otherwise, I'll be well to do when you buy a book, but I wouldn't be well to do yet, but but I already, notwithstanding not being well to do, just the very idea that I'm selling a book makes makes black leftists, like feel outraged, or feel like, hey, this guy's a crook because he's selling a book. Now, if they open the book, they'll see that it's of immense value, but But again, that leftist thinking will make you, will make you denounce a black person, and I think that's I think that's really fundamental with regard to, that's really fundamental, as an analysis for our people. Just this reality that, leftism, will have you denouncing other black people who are doing well for their people and who can potentially do well for themselves. I always like to say, or at least like to think, what is it that black people would have Marcus Garvey do today? What would they have him do today? Because it seems like if Marcus Garvey were working at a McDonald's, that black people would be happy and say, hey, there's an honest, man, and a man of integrity, but that's not consistent with black nationalism. Not to say that you can't work at McDonald's for black nationalism, but the idea is that black people should be working for themselves and they should find opportunities for themselves, and if they can manage to become well-to-do through their own entrepreneurship, if you will, or through their own activities for their people, right, to the best of their abilities at least, then that should be something to be extolled and esteemed, but the reality is that they would prefer if if a black nationalist was still a white servant. They would prefer if Marcus Garvey, clocked in with any old white corporation, and that's the trouble of our community, really, because we don't see value in raising our people who are doing for us. We don't see value in like I said, the laws of reciprocity, and the laws of reciprocity, the laws of harmony are fundamental to organization, fundamental. Like I say elsewhere, in the Pro-Black Compendium, there is a proverb that says organization is impossible unless those who know the laws of harmony lay the foundation. You understand? So you cannot organize unless you understand the laws of harmony, unless you understand reciprocity. If we cannot organize, we cannot have power. We can't have power unless you practice reciprocity. Too many people are listening to my podcast and saying, hey, great podcast, and then that's it. And I mean, sure, sometimes praise or whatever is good. Sometimes that's good, but I've been organizing for black people for years. You see what I'm saying? I've been organizing on your behalf for years, standing on street corners, getting black people to come to organizational meetings to review. It was then a pamphlet. The 8-week disciplinary program was a pamphlet, but basically it's now pages in the Pro-Black Compendium. I was out there standing for hours, with sometimes with a clipboard, signing people up to, come to these meetings. And many people who came to those meetings were like, wow, I was never even exposed to this information. Never heard of John Ritter Bruce, Marcus Garvey. Sometimes casually I bring up Carlos Cooks. Osman Desis, in fact, was one of the people who came to those meetings, and you heard him say it was a good, it was a great experience for him. But I say all this because that, a lot of times when I was out there, I would get praises or say, hey, I support what you're I support what you're doing, or you're doing the right thing. Keep it up. And I've heard it before. A lot of people you'll never see again will tell you, hey, I support you, wholeheartedly. And the reality is that right there is not organization. It's not reciprocity. It's not organization. It's not going to advance us as a people. It's not going to give us power. You understand? So if you want to be powerful, be reciprocal. It's really that simple. If you want to be powerful, be reciprocal. If you appreciate, like I hope I played it in the during the break. You know, I have a Cash app. You know, and if that's how you can help, then help that way. If that's how you show appreciation, then show appreciation that way. You know, I don't like to hear that my people have been giving Marvel Studios $300 million a week. I don't like to hear that, because what we could have done with $300 million a week organized is at least generate $500 a week for ourselves. You know, we could have released for lack of a better word, a Thor movie or whatever. You know, we could have released a movie about a mythical, all-powerful white society or whatever. You know, and have white people coming into the theater. You know, get the OPM. You know, other people's money. You know, and have that generate wealth for us. I mean, I wouldn't do that, but we could have done something with with what we had, and yet instead of that, you know, we you know, for lack of a better word, a lot of black people played dress up. You know, played dress up and watched the movie, and made, you know, white people filthy rich. And it's not as if we don't have that money. You know, a lot of times, you know, a lot of young black people walking around with very expensive shoes, no books. You know, no books. Like I've been to a sister's house. She had, you know, she told me that, you know, let's say she lost all her shoes, and it was over $1,000 worth of shoes, you know, but she had no books in the house, you know, and my thing is, you know, you should at least have more books than you have shoes, you know, you should at least have more books than you have shoes. Honestly, you should have more books than you have articles of clothing. You understand? So if you add up your socks, your underwear, your shirts and your pants, your shoes, you know, maybe even your necklaces, if you add those all up, you should have more books than that. You know, that's what I have. You know, and the reason why I would bring that up is because I only have one pair of shoes. So, you know, and I know not everybody only has one pair of shoes. You know what I'm saying? but I would add up all of that to say, yeah, you know, have yourself a sizable library, you know, and revisit it, frequent it, you know, because reading is the difference. Reading is the difference. And when you start off your book collection, if you didn't already start it, or when you're trying to add to your book collection, you know, don't forget Marcus Garvey, don't forget Carlos Cooks, and don't forget me. Oh, and that's all I have to say today. But I do want to inform you that hereafter you can listen to this podcast on Mixcloud. So I created a Mixcloud account at the recommendation of one of the brothers in the comment section of the last video. So I created a Mixcloud account, and you can listen to this podcast there. I know I should have told you that in the beginning of this podcast, but But yeah, listen to that, enjoy it, and I look forward to hearing from you next week. But like I said, be reciprocal. If you enjoyed this, get you a copy of the book, of all 3 books, and you could be generous. You could be generous. There's no need for you to want to give exact value. You can be generous because part of what you're doing is you're letting me know, and you're letting my son know, that serving you is a respectable endeavor. That's what you're doing. You're saying, hey, for your service, I thank you. Or for your service, you've done enough. You've done for me. Don't let me or my son say, hey, we really gotta serve white people because at least they pay. Don't let me, my son, your sons and daughters, don't let anyone say, hey, I gotta serve white people because at least they pay. Don't let it be. It sounds disgusting even coming out of my mouth. It sounds disgusting even coming out of my mouth. But that is what we do when we are not reciprocal with ourselves. When we don't give anything to our people who are giving to us. So thanks so much, and even if send around the Cash App. I made a separate commercial for the Carlos Cooks reader, so send that around if you can. Or even send around my Cash App handle, which is $ ABS only, just send this around so that we as a people can say, hey, doing for ourselves is a worthwhile endeavor. Because many of us, because like I said, I've been organizing for years, and a lot of times you would hear brothers and sisters say, I used to do that, but it's not worthwhile, or I was getting nowhere, or it would just cost me a lot. A lot of brothers and sisters turn away from doing for us because there's no reciprocity, or there's little reciprocity. So, don't contribute to that ethos. Give what you can. All right, Seeker. Shem Hotep, Uncle Jah, Seneb Neb, Amen, Ma'at, Dua Neche. Thank you for listening. I invite you to join hands with your brothers and sisters as we recite the African affirmation together. It's a call and response, so follow my lead. We are an African people, robbed from our homeland, robbed of our names, our languages, our cultures, our religions, our womanhood, our manhood, our sisterhood, our brotherhood, our motherhood, our fatherhood, our selfhood, our nationhood, and our self-respect. But we shall rise, never to fall again. Up, you mighty race, you can accomplish what you will. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace.